Thanks so much for coming along, everyone, today in this very sunny weather. And we're joined by Beth. If you're new to any Content UK webinars, so hi, I'm Christina. I'm the founder of Content UK, which is a community for UK freelance and in-house content marketers. And today's session, as you know, is all about how you can position and package your freelance content, your content services to be a happy and wealthy freelancer, which is obviously what we all want to be. And this is going to be with Beth Gladstone, who is a freelance content strategist, and she's implemented content strategies for companies like Eventbrite, ScreenCloud, Crowdfire, and also has a content podcast, which I highly recommend you check out, called Content Makers, and loads of practical tips in that podcast. And just a few logistical bits before we get started. So in terms of structure, I'll hand over to Beth in a moment, where she'll speak for about 15-20 minutes for her presentation, and then we'll jump into a Q&A. So if you have any questions as we go, just pop them into the Zoom chat and we'll try and get through as many as we can in that session. In terms of the recording, if you are already a Content UK member, this will be uploaded to the Learning Hub next week along with slides. And Beth is also in the Slack group to answer, so she can answer any questions that you have, any follow-ups afterwards. Okay, so enough from me. I will hand over to Beth. Enjoy.
Lovely, thanks Christina. Let me share my screen. Can everyone see that okay?
Yep.
Yeah, lovely. Okay, great. Yeah, thanks Christina for the intro. So today I wanted to talk about packaging your services and pricing. And the reason why I wanted to speak about this is because over the course of my career, I've spent about half of it as a freelancer. So a freelance content strategist, SEO person, interim head of content or marketing manager. So obviously as the freelancer, pitching myself, my packages, my pricing to clients to win work. And then the other half of my career, I've been in-house as a head of marketing or head of content. And with that, I've had lots of involvement in hiring freelancers and agencies. So over the years, I'd say I've seen the good, bad, great, ugly of packages, pricing, objection handling. And I wanted to kind of summarize everything that I've learned over that time, because I don't think that pricing is spoken about. It feels like a bit of a taboo. And I actually think it's good to share our knowledge and experience so that everyone can, have a happy and wealthy career. And this year is the first year in my freelance business that I'll turn over 100K. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because definitely online, I feel like we hear about this mythical 6-figure salary as if it's the holy grail, as if that's a thing that everyone wants to get to. And I think it's often, again, shrouded in mystery. People don't actually talk about it. And in my experience, it's probably easier than you think to get to this point if that's something that you want to do. And then secondly, I've done this being a freelancer, which again, I think gets a bad rap in terms of how you package yourself, and also using a combination of day rate and value-based pricing. And again, I think there's some stigma around day rate pricing. So I'll actually show you how I got to that salary this year based on the packages and the pricing that I offered. So let's get into it. So the first thing I wanted to cover is what you call yourself as a business owner will definitely affect how successful you are with your pricing and packaging strategy. And effectively, I could call myself any one of these three things. So I could call myself a freelancer, a consultant, or an agency, and that would work regardless of which model I chose. However, these models, depending on what you call yourself, will all mean different things to your clients, and that obviously affects how you can price and package yourself. So we all probably understand the difference between these three things. So a freelancer, the perception of a freelancer is usually that it's one person and that they actually do the execution. And as a result, how you can price is often on a retainer basis, and it's often time-based as a freelancer. So you'll charge by day or by hour. When you call yourself a consultant, I think the perception there is that you'll probably do something high level, so strategy and maybe not the execution. And an agency, you can call yourself an agency. I know lots of people who do this who are just one person businesses and they market themselves as an agency. but traditionally the perception of an agency is that it's multiple people, and then there are different models in terms of how you can price based on being an agency. And the reason why this is important to think about how you name yourself and how you package yourself to clients is because there's a different pricing perception for each of these models. So as a freelancer, clients feel a personal bond with you. You're almost like an extended person in the company, and that gives you the ability to maybe charge a bit more because you're trusted and you know a lot and you're closely involved in their company. As a consultant, you can definitely charge a higher rate than a freelancer because as a consultant, the name suggests that you're an expert, you're the go-to person. However, in the past, I've had clients who will never work with consultants. They will never search for a consultant because to them, that means expensive. So trying to find a consultant equals expensive. So this is something, again, to think about. And then also when I've been pitching for work as a freelancer, I'm often up against agencies, and I've had clients say to me, why are you charging that much? You're just one person. Whereas if it's an agency, the perception of an agency is that it's more than one person, and so they need to charge more. So the client will be aware as an agency that you have overhead. And when I've been an in-house head of content hiring agencies, we wouldn't bulk at, an agency charging 10K a month retainer. That was pretty standard. Whereas if it was a freelancer and they wanted to charge 10K a month, we would definitely question that. So this is important because you need to think about how what you call yourself changes how you can price yourself and what that perception means to your client. And then let's talk about time-based versus value-based pricing. So when I talk about time-based, I mean anything that's quantified by time. So day rate, hourly pricing. And value-based is when you attach a figure to a project, but it's not quantified by time. And I actually use a combination of these models in my business. And this is something that I hope I can get across, is that you can be flexible. It's about building the packages and the pricing that works for you. I don't think there's one right or wrong way to do this. Value-based pricing is great, but it also has some downsides, which I'll cover in a minute. So as an example, when I work as an interim head of content, I always work on a day rate and I'll commit 2 days per week to a client. And then I use value-based pricing when it's a one-off project. So for example, if I'm creating a content strategy for someone, that's usually about a six to 8 week project. And I won't price that by the time it will take me. I'll price it based on this is the value of that project to you, and it will be a one-off cost. And as I've kind of mentioned, people love value-based pricing, but I think very few people are successful with it, and I'll explain why. So to make value-based pricing work, you usually need to have gravitas. So usually when you meet with a client, if you want to be able to provide value-based pricing, they usually need to already be quite invested in you. So I think if you're working with very cold leads, maybe people who found you in Google, it can be quite difficult to get to the point where they'll accept value-based pricing. Whereas if you're coming in through word of mouth and you're already recommended and proven, then I think it's much easier to make value-based pricing work. And this is the only thing that most people miss with value-based pricing. So when you're pricing on your time, it's very easy to quantify that. And you have to remember that the person hiring you, they always have a boss. So even I tend to work with founders and CEOs of companies. Even they have to go back to their board or their investors and explain why they want to spend X amount of money hiring me as a freelancer or a consultant. So with time-based pricing, that's really easy because they can go to their board and say, hey, we want to hire Beth. She's going to do 2 days a week for us, and this is what it's going to cost. And everyone understands the basis of the time that I'll spend. When it's value-based pricing, you still need to give the person hiring you some things that they can use to quantify why they're hiring you, why the price is the way it is to their bosses. And this is where I think people fall down. So a couple of ways you can do this. You can figure out what the project is worth to the client. So you'll need to ask some questions early on in your pitching process. For example, if you're managing a website build and that the new website is going to bring in 100K of new work for that company, and you want to charge them 10K, then it's obvious that that's where the value is, and that's why you can charge them 10K, because it's a fraction of what they will make in the end. Deliverables, I always use deliverables in my pitch documents when I'm putting together packages. So even with value-based pricing, for example, if it was a content strategy, I would say, here's what I'll deliver within this content strategy. So an audit of your website, a presentation showing you the roadmap of changes that you need to make, an editorial calendar, SEO guides for your writers. So it's very easy for then the person hiring me to take that list and compare it to what I'm charging and know that they're getting the value based on that list of deliverables. So I think if you want to make value-based pricing work, you really need to understand and start to think about how you can quantify that, because just saying I'd like to charge X amount for this because I've been doing this a long time, because I'm an expert, that's not usually enough. And then to move on to the 100K six-figure salary. So there are many, many ways you can build your business as a freelancer or a consultant to get to that figure, or to get to any figure. Really, it's just based on math if you're in the US. So this is actually borrowed, the concept of this is actually borrowed from an article that's known quite well in the SaaS community, which is by Christopher Yance, who's a partner at an investment group. And he wrote a blog saying 5 ways to build $100 million business in SaaS, and that's using different software models. So I just wanted to borrow the concept to show you here how I've built a business to get to that figure and how you can as well. So if you start to think of these animals as different types of clients that you offer different packages to. So I tend to work with elephants. I don't call my clients this, by the way, it's just an analogy, but I tend to work mainly with elephant clients who I charge quite a lot to. I work with them very deeply. This is the kind of interim head of content roles, and I'll just work with a few of them at the time because obviously they'll take a lot of my time. And then I combine that with Deers, which is really my one-off content strategy projects, which I can do for sort of 6 to 8 weeks, and I can take on a few of those across the year. Some companies like to work in these bottom 2 models. So I see a lot of agencies that charge their clients maybe £1,000 monthly retainer, and they have more clients and they do something light touch, like just write a few blog posts for them or just maintain their website. So if you prefer to work at a higher level with, not as a deep level with a lot more clients, then you can obviously choose one of these models and you can still get to 100K easily. And then the Bs, I would say that's sort of the passive income model. So for example, if you have an ebook that costs £10 and you have a big online audience and you sell that to 10,000 people, you've got yourself a 100K business. So it's just interesting to look at your packages and to work out what you're charging, and then you can actually work backwards from what you'd like to earn. And to show you, so this has been my year, my 100K year. So I've worked with one company very deeply on a monthly retainer for a year, and that's taken me to about 52K. And then I also worked with another client, another elephant client, deeply for 6 months before I handed over to their in-house team. So that's made up the bulk of my income. And then I've done 4 sort of one-off strategy projects, and that's how I've got to 100K. So just to show you that you can sort of combine those models, you can pick and choose those models to get to any figure that you need to or want to. And then lastly, I just want to talk a bit about objection handling, because in my experience, when you're not successful with your pricing, it's generally not down to the price. It's generally down to the fact that you haven't proven your expertise, the client doesn't trust in you, and you can't handle their objections. So I just wanted to give you some examples of common objections that come up around pricing and what you can say to combat that. So with value-based pricing, the question you will always get asked, I still get asked this on pretty much every value-based project, is, but how many days is that? Because for people, it's much easier for them to be able to quantify it based on time. So something that I would say to this is, my pricing isn't based on a day rate, it's based on the deliverables. And again, this is where it's really important to have that list of deliverables that you can tell them. And then also you can even say to them, if you need to quantify this, it's a combination of the time I need for those deliverables, my expertise, my investment in myself, my training, my project management, my team, whatever you need to quantify that. But basically you're giving your client a list of things that they can take to their boss. Secondly, you might just get a more broader question. What is that project fee based on? And here is where I would say something like, very briefly, it's based on, my time and expertise to give you those deliverables. And then this is where I'd pull in, for example, when I did this similar project for X, these are the results. And you really need to have, if you've been working for a while, hopefully you'll have some case studies. They don't need to be in depth, they don't need to be materials, you just need to have a couple that you can talk about briefly and talk about the results. And when I bring up any results from my previous companies and talk about 10% increase, 100K MRR, growth by X amount, usually that's the point where the client says, great, yeah, let's go ahead. They often only need something like that to cling on to be happy with the figure that you're putting on your work. And then day rate pricing. So Christina and I were talking a bit about this earlier. So if you do choose to use time-based pricing and you want to commit X amount of days to your clients, there's two ways you can go about this. So some people prefer to say to their client, I'll work for you Monday and Thursday. It sets clear boundaries. It means that your clients can't contact you Tuesday or Friday. Personally, one of the things that I prize most as a freelancer is my freedom. I don't like feeling like an employee, that I have to be at my desk 9 to 5. So when clients ask me this, I don't want to give them set days. So I'll say something like, actually, I prefer to split your time with me across the week until the deliverables have been met. So you're still letting them know that you're going to achieve the work that you've agreed. And this gives me flexibility. It means I can answer your questions. And it also means that I can monitor things across the week. And they're usually pretty happy with that if you choose to do that. And then lastly, something that I know comes up a lot with writing in particular is you'll get compared against crazy quotes, which devalue the industry and which the work isn't comparable. And if this does come up for you, something you can practice saying is just having this objection ready. So personally, I don't like that type of pricing. It puts focus on word count rather than quality. I price on a day rate because it lets me do X, Y, Z. So really, with any objection, it's just learning about how to differentiate yourself. At any time you pitch to clients, make sure you note down the objections and practice this because it will help you to be more successful with your packages. So in summary, to be successful with your pricing and packages, it's really important to look at the business model that works for you, that suits your skill set. Excuse me. It depends on how you want to work with clients. Do you want to do one-off projects? Do you prefer retainer projects for the security? Or can you be successful with value-based pricing? And can you handle your objectives? And if you can nail all of those, then I think you'll be well on your way to being a happy, wealthy freelancer or business owner. So thank you very much for listening. Hope I didn't go over the time there. And if you'd like to connect with me further, I share a lot of tips around this kind of thing on my Instagram. And as Christina mentioned, I also have a podcast where I speak to other content marketers.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Beth. I learned loads in that. That was really eye-opening. But I really like how you've just really thought through all the objections and just properly thought about how to reply to all of those, because it comes up so often, but it's sometimes something you can so easily skip past.
Yeah, I mean, I know this is such a huge topic. You could probably do a talk on every element in there. So yeah, please let me know if anyone has questions.
Got a comment from Daisy here. Wonderful practical advice, thank you. Yeah, if anyone has questions, pop them in. I'll go through some of the ones that people submitted before. A lot was around a very common theme of raising rates. So if you've already got existing freelance rates, how do you raise them? It's a question from Adriana.
Yeah, sure. So I've definitely come up against this in the past. And I think I always look at it from how I used to look at it when I was a manager in-house. So some employees would come to me and say, hey, I've been here a year, I need a salary increase. And I think if you approach your clients like this, you can do annual increment increases as a freelancer. And I see a lot of people that do this with their financial year. So every April, I think clients will always accept an increment increase annually at the end of the financial year or start of the financial year. But what I would say is if you really want to do a jump with your freelance rates, and I've done this in the past, you need to look at what else you're offering compared to what you were offering before. So what new skills do you have? Has the scope of work changed? Are you more invested in the company? And then just have an honest conversation with them, lay everything out, let them have time to think about it, and hopefully you can come to an agreement that's beneficial for both of you.
Yeah, that's a good tip. Would you recommend doing it after a certain amount of time, or you think it doesn't matter as long as you're able to increase that value?
I think periodically as a business owner, you should be thinking every year, re-looking at your clients. So that's always a good time. But definitely if the scope changes, then your pricing needs to change. And hopefully by that point, you're so valuable to the client anyway that they won't be worried about needing to pay you more.
Mm-hmm. And on that point of so if the scope changes, how would you approach that if you've said your deliverables and then the company will keep asking for extra stuff? At what point do you have that conversation, and how do you have it about, perhaps changing that price?
Yeah, so I think I see a lot of freelancers who are so rigid, and I do think you need a degree of flexibility with clients to have those happy sort of long-lasting relationships. So what I would do is, you be a bit flexible, do a bit of stuff that's out of scope, be monitoring it, making a list, and then when you feel like actually this has really exceeded the scope, I would ask for a meeting, just saying, hey, I think we need to refresh my contract and just look at what we want to achieve together. And then you can offer the client two options. So either, look, these are all the things that I've been doing that are outside of my scope. Would you like to extend my contract with you to cover these things? Or would you rather I just focus back on the things that we were doing originally? And then it gives them the option. And if they say, oh no, we just want you to focus on the things you were doing originally, then you can just push back on anything that's outside the scope. But usually I think they'll say, yeah, let's extend the scope.
That's a nice idea, having that list there, so it's just nice and objective.
Yeah, exactly.
Another one on pricing. Camille's asking, how do I think about pricing without getting severe imposter syndrome?
Yeah, Camille, this is tough, and especially as women, I think we hate talking about pricing. We hate asking for money. But I think it took me a while to overcome this. And I think it's one thing that is really good is just I keep almost like a swipe file of nice client comments that I've had, feedback, results. And sometimes it's good just to read that yourself, just to give you a boost and to know that actually you're charging because you're an expert and because you've invested in yourself and because you get great results. And then also more on the kind of spiritual side, as women, the feminine energy is all about receiving and being in abundance. And you're actually kind of going against your feminine nature by feeling like you can't receive. So maybe look into some of that. I've done a lot of work on that this year, and it's really helped me overcome this idea of worrying about pricing and feeling like I shouldn't be asking for anything.
Yeah, you deserve it, Camille. A couple of questions from Dominic here. Oh, and a nice comment from Veronica saying, super valuable advice, loved your object handling and confidence, Beth. Dominic has said, how can you pitch yourself as an agency if you're not? Presumably you'll be found out pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it is very obvious to me when I'm hiring someone and they're calling themselves an agency and it's a one person company. I think what I see a lot now when I'm hiring agencies on behalf of my clients is that people are quite honest actually, and they'll say, yeah, my agency is me and I lead on the project, and then I bring in subject experts who can help. So I basically build a custom team for your project. So that is an agency model. It might not be the traditional agency model, but I think clients are often open to that. So that's one way you can do it. You can get away with marketing yourself as an agency, even if it's just you, but I do think your client will realize that sometimes honesty is the best policy.
Yeah, honesty is always good. And Dominic's also asking, when you referred to a project fee, is that on top of the content production work, i.e. like a management fee?
Yeah, so I'd say for the projects I work on, this is separate. So I'll tend to do a content strategy, which will have its own set fee, and the output of that is a strategy. And then for the execution, I don't tend to do the execution anymore. So usually they'll take that in-house, or they'll need to hire freelancers. And sometimes I'll just do maybe one day a month with them, helping them to stay on top of the strategy. But if you're doing the strategy and the execution, I'd probably set up your first project with them as the strategy and then agree an ongoing retainer or content production fee for the months after that.
Yeah, that sounds like a nice way of layering it. And you mentioned, so you were doing like 1.5 elephant projects, and then I forgot what the other animal was, the second one down.
Deer.
The deer. Yeah, so are you doing like those elephant projects, are you doing those at the same time and with the deers? How are you managing like just all these different companies and projects within your week?
Yeah, so I tend to have one big elephant project at a time. I've had two for the last 6 months, and it's been tough. I'm pretty tired. So yeah, so I'll work deeply with one client, and then obviously that's regular work, takes up maybe half my week, just a bit less. Mm-hmm. And then around that, I'll bring in one-off projects as and when I can. So probably only one at a time. And because they only take sort of 6 to 8 weeks, I can just book those in. And even so at the moment, because I knew my week would be fully booked. I've booked a strategy project that doesn't start until August, and I booked that in June, sorry. So I'll just say to the client, I'm next available for this project from August. Would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, okay. Quite intense. But it's good that you're postponing some of them to Dominic said thank you. And let's go to a couple of other ones. Holly was asking, how do you know when you might be pricing yourself out of the target audience you'd like to work with?
Yeah, hi Holly, I recognise that name. Yeah, so that's a great question, and I think it's definitely about knowing the industry. So I always do sort of research when I'm coming out with new packages or pricing. I know it's difficult because not everyone is transparent, but if you have any friends in the industry, you can sort of bounce pricing off of them. You can also look at people's websites. So some people will have pricing, especially agencies, they'll have pricing for their packages. So I'd have a look at those, try and get a rough ballpark figure, and then also just listening to client feedback. So if you're getting, as I said before, I don't think rejection is usually a factor of the price. It's usually because of another factor. But if you are hearing the same things over and over, it's too expensive, then you can start to get a feel of where your pricing are. Although it's also important to think about the context of the world as well, because it does depend on how much certainty there are. It depends on budgets in your industry. If you can find out, when the new budgets come in for your specific industry, if you're quite niche, then you can also build your pricing around that, because people, for example, in my industry, people tend to have budget at the beginning of the year, and then around September time, and during summer and Christmas, they don't tend to invest. So you can start to look at those factors as well.
That's a great strategy around pitching at certain times in line with budget. Dominic's got another one here. He said, sorry for hounding the question board. Can I ask about how and how often you go about finding new business? Is it mainly word of mouth / recommendations, or do you advertise too? Good question.
Yeah, so Dominic, I'm a rubbish freelancer because all of my business comes in not because I'm great at marketing myself, but because of word of mouth. So pretty much all of my things are referrals from past clients or people that I know in the industry. You can build out your marketing strategy far beyond that. I also have quite a lot of success on Instagram, even though I've got a very small following. They're highly engaged, and I share freely content, ideas with the community, and I do tend to get referrals through that as well. So I think there's lots of different routes. It just depends on what works for you.
Instagram does seem to be becoming more popular I'm seeing a few more content marketers pop up.
Yeah. I mean, my Instagram community is quite different actually to my clients. So it's more people who sort of want to learn content marketing and learn how to do things. But I don't know, people will always know someone. So I've actually had some quite big projects because someone who works in a big agency follows me on Instagram and they recommended me to their boss for a project. So yeah, you can find leads through different sources.
That's really nice. And I guess it's more of quite a human touch on Instagram as well. So they feel like they can see what it's like to work with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see what else we've got here. Nia is asking, what is one mistake you made in the beginning that you can help others avoid?
Oh, so many mistakes. Okay, so one thing that I did a lot of, and I see people doing today, is doing the work before you've won the project. So generally now, I don't do any work for my clients until they've hired me. So for me, that's coming up with a pitch and a proposal, and what does that actually look like without having to audit their content, look at their website, come up with ideas. So my process is that I'll do an interview with the client, I'll find out what they're looking for, and then my proposal looks like a one-page document, and I give them an overview of what I can do for them. I give them a list of deliverables and the cost, and that's it. So I don't do big 50-page presentations of ideas for clients, because in the early days I did that, and most of the time I didn't get hired. And because especially larger companies, their sign off and process is so long and changes so quickly based on external factors that it's often not even that they're trying to sort of screw you over and steal your ideas, but something can change in that process, and then you've done all of this work and not won the project. So I've really refined how I pitch to clients, and that's definitely a tip that I would give people, is that you can win work without having to do lots and lots of work up front without being paid for it. I think the only exception there is if you're in a big agency, because there is this agents, for example, if you're going after Nike's ad campaign, you do have to come up with the pitch before you can win it, but definitely not as a freelancer or small business owner.
That's a really good tip, because it is just always very tempting to go and do loads of topic research for them and do like mini audit. So that's, I guess you just got to have confidence in yourself that you're telling them your process is effective.
Yeah, absolutely. And using your chats with them to sort of sell what you do, why you're good at it, who you've done it with before, and using that as your proof that they should work with you, rather than trying to give content away, because you can spend all day doing that. It can be really tough, and I've done it, so it does take a while to build your confidence.
Were there any other mistakes you had there that you I thought you had a list there, but don't worry about it.
Also letting scope creep take over. I'm such a people pleaser. I find it very hard to say no, and definitely the first time I was freelance, I just said yes to everything, and I used to work every evening, all weekend. It took over my life. And I think sometimes when you first go freelance, it can be good to be a yes person, because you learn so much and you work out what you like to do, what works, what doesn't, and then you can really refine your approach. But it's not sustainable long term. So I had to learn a lot about boundaries, and approaching those in a warm way, and still maintaining really good client relationships without just blindly saying yes. And again, I think that's a confidence thing. It's an age thing for me as well, feeling like you can push back, and definitely thinking that you're working with your clients as a partner. You're not, you don't have to blindly agree to everything, because you're the expert, they're paying you, they've brought you in for a reason. So everything they want to do might not actually be the best thing for their strategy or for the original goals. So just having the confidence to use that as a way to push back.
Yeah. And in terms of dodgy clients, like, are there any red flags that you'd look out for clients early on, like that might not be good to work with?
Yeah, clients that hound you incessantly before you've even committed to working with them. I had one client he wasn't even a client, actually. It was just somebody who'd got in touch to ask about some marketing help, who would just ring me constantly and was annoyed that I wasn't answering the phone instantly. Massive red flag for me. Again, it's about respecting each other's time. Clients who ask for too much up front, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be a nightmare client, but again, you have to have that respect there. And I don't believe in, if there's always a bit of negotiation with pricing, and sometimes you have to find a happy medium. But clients who try and beat you down on price, I'll be very firm. I won't go drop my prices right down just to get the work, because for me that's a red flag that they will try and squeeze everything they can out of you in the future, and I don't like working in that way. So yeah, there's some of the red flags that I now look out for.
Yeah. That's good. And you mentioned before that when you first work with a new client, you ask them a bunch of questions before you start working with them. What sort of questions do you tend to ask in those?
Yeah, depends on the project really, and what they've got in touch with me about. But as an example, so for example, if someone comes to me and says, we want a content strategy, then on that call, I like to dig into, why do they want a content strategy? What are their expectations? What are they measuring at the moment? So what does success look like for them? Because also, especially in content, different terms mean different things to different people. So when I think of content strategy, I think they mean SEO, blog, website. They want to drive organic growth. Some people say content strategy and they mean social media, which is not something that I really do anymore. So I think it is good to sort of really understand what they want from the project, what they think would be success for them, and then also maybe explaining a bit to them about how you would normally work with a client on that project, and just putting out the feelers of whether that would work for them. Because again, different clients have different expectations of what it means to hire a freelancer or a contractor. So really just gathering as much information. And for me, by the end of that first call, I should be able to go away and put a pitch together for them, a proposal. And we shouldn't need to have endless calls and meetings, and then once they've agreed and we're going to work together, then I'll do a kickoff session, and that's where I'll ask, you know, all about their customers, the buying prices, the buying process, the competitors, and any other questions that I need to actually execute the strategy. So I think what a lot of freelancers do is they use the discovery call as actually a project kickoff call. And I think you're looking for two different things.
Yeah, that's a really nice distinction, just having those as separate meetings and getting the execution stuff as a separate talk. That's good.
Yeah, because you need to, you know, with content stuff, you need to go so deep with the client. It's very difficult to do that in the first call. And you don't want to do that until they're committed to you. Yeah,
really good tip. A couple more before you wrap up. Oh, Nick just said, this is a great session. Thanks, Beth and Christina. I tend to pitch as a freelancer / consultant, but dip into the agency model as and when.
Yeah, I really like that, Nick. Similar as well, you know, it doesn't have to be rigid. You can build out different services, test different things, see what you like and see what's right for each project. I think it's great to keep flexibility.
And this, I guess you sort of covered this one, but one from Laura. Any tips for transitioning to higher price points or packages and away from daily or hourly rates?
So again, I think this is a thing where we all think that value-based pricing is going to be better, and maybe it is for you, but I definitely question, you know, why do you want to do value-based pricing? Is it just because you want to earn more, or is it because you actually want to do a different model? If so, I think you can use some of the tips that I mentioned earlier in terms of how to quantify value-based pricing and how to make clients feel comfortable with that when you're not just pricing on a day rate. In terms of raising your prices for new clients, obviously you can just start to build out your packages and to attach figures to that as you see fit, and then sort of test the waters and adjust those slightly. And then with existing clients, as I mentioned earlier, you can either do an incremental annual increase, or you can look at the scope of work or the deliverables or your expertise and you know, have a discussion with them about how much they should be paying you.
And what are your thoughts on showing how much you charge on your website publicly, or do you keep it behind closed doors?
Do you know what? That's an interesting question, because I've just had my website rebuilt and redesigned, and I didn't have prices on there before because my services last time I was freelance, my services are very flexible and I just used to package it up per client. And this time I thought, actually I want to be a bit more formulaic and have like 3 set offerings, and I put pricing on my website because I like to be transparent and I think it's good. And I found I didn't get as many inquiries. So luckily, when I had my website built, I asked for the ability to switch the pricing on and off so that I could test this. So I've switched the pricing off, and I'm definitely getting more inquiries again, even though my pricing is the same. So now I'm still giving them the same pricing, but I think that the pricing scared people when they came to the website because they hadn't already spoken to me. Whereas now they speak to me in the process, I can try and put myself across in a good way, give them examples, and then when I give them the price, they seem to be okay with it. So I guess that's that age-old thing of sell the value before you give the figure. Not saying that's a hard and fast rule for everyone, but that's just been my experience this year.
Oh, that's a really interesting experiment there.
Yeah, but I mean, I would say feel free if anyone has, you know, you're pricing for a project, you don't know where to pitch it, always feel free to message me, because I don't think there's enough transparency in pricing, and I'm always happy to sort of share ideas and give feedback, because I think it helps the whole industry if we can all be on the same level. Yeah,
I think that's definitely true. And everyone, when you ask each other, I think everyone's quite open to talking about it, but it does feel scary to talk about pricing with each other.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, Beth, do you have any final parting words before we wrap up?
I think I've spoken quite enough. But yeah, I hope that was useful for everyone. I know there's a lot to cover there, so as we said, if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to put them in the community or to get in touch.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was brilliant. There's so many things to think about from that. And you think you said at the beginning, but where can people find you on?
So I'm most active on my Instagram, which is at Beth by Content, or in the Content UK community. So yeah, feel free. I am on LinkedIn. I'm not very active on there, but feel free to connect with me. I tend to reply to messages more than I actually post on there. So yeah, feel free to connect on there as well. But yeah, thank you for having me, Christine. That's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. That was brilliant. Have a good rest of the day, everyone. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.